Welcome to another episode of Entrepreneurship Unboxed, your front row seat to startup stories, struggles, and secrets to success. I'm your host, Ajay. Our guest today is Ravi Kurani, the CEO and founder of MySutro, a robotics platform that helps monitor water quality for swimming pools and beyond. After growing up in the pool industry and seeing the need for better water sensing technology, Ravi has built MySutro into a company helping thousands of pool owners and expanding into new water verticals. From concierging early customers to navigating the fundraising slog, we'll learn how Ravi built MySutro from the ground up. I can't wait to unpack his entrepreneurial journey. Welcome to the show, Ravi. Give us the 60-second backstory on MySutro. How'd you get the idea and what was your career before taking the entrepreneurial leap?
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, definitely. So starting with MySutro is basically a floating laboratory that measures if your water is safe. So what we basically do is we take existing water quality equipment, which sometimes is the size of a big table inside of a laboratory, and we stick it and we shrink it down to basically 1/50th the size of that laboratory. The way that I actually came up with this idea starts actually with my father and mother. They immigrated from India back in 1980s to the US. And funnily enough, my dad actually had a degree in chemistry from India. And he couldn't find work. And so basically he started to clean swimming pools, right? In the US, there's this concept of like a pool boy that goes around in their truck and they clean swimming pools. Through doing that and kind of understanding the swimming pool industry, he ended up growing an empire of swimming pool and spa supply stores. Kind of a really weird and niche industry, but that's kind of where I got my start in really understanding entrepreneurship and also understanding the swimming pool and spa industry. And so I've done everything from, clean swimming pools to run water tests inside the swimming pool store. And that's kind of where the initial idea of Sutro came about, right? That's kind of where I used to do the work and people bringing in water samples and me testing their water is where we ended up getting to in making an autonomous robot do that. I kind of, through my work prior to building Sutro, I was actually in venture capital. And so I used to be an associate at a small fund in India called Village Capital. And out of that experience, the number one thing that is pertinent to this story is that we saw a lot of water deals that came across our desk. And in those water deals, people were mostly focusing on water filters, right? How do you fix the water? How do you clean the water? But you can only fix and clean the water if you know what's wrong with it, right? So you need to know the diagnostics, you need to know the sensing. And that's kind of where another, tangential thread of building Sutro ended up coming about. And so those experiences kind of combined is what gave me the leverage to come up with the idea for Sutro, start it, and then launch it in the swimming pool and spa industry.
Amazing origin story. Let's rewind to the early days. Walk us through the first steps you took to validate the idea and start bringing MySutro to market.
Yeah, the first thing that I actually ended up doing was validating whether or not there was a need for this, right? And so that basically comes about by me, first of all, looking at why I'm creating this business. There is a behavior in the swimming pool industry and swimming pools and spas that people need to test their water. Even if Sutro did not exist, right? Sans Sutro, we did not exist in the world today. People still need to test their water because if they do not test their water, their swimming pool turns green, right? It starts growing algae. If you're not putting chemicals inside there, it's not a fun place to swim. And so what we basically did was we took existing behavior that already exists in the market and we basically made it autonomous, right? We automated behavior that's already existing in the market. So with that hypothesis, we're like, well, how do we build this device, right? Does it need to be a floating laboratory? Does it need to be piped inside of a piping system? Do we maybe need to make a better pool guy route, right? Do I need to figure out how to get more humans into backyards to figure out how to test the water? And so we actually went through a few of these solution ideations. And the best one that we came to was actually this floating robot that had an app that told you exactly what to do. And the way that we validated that, to your second question, was we literally found customers, right? We found people that were unbiased, that was not my mom, not my dad, real customers that gave us real feedback that sometimes was hard. And sometimes people were like, I would not buy this. It doesn't make any sense. All the way to this is the best thing that I've ever found. Right. And so part of what you want to do is when you start finding language and behavior of people that are supporting your business, you keep targeting those sorts of people because those are who become your early evangelists and your early users. And kind of then later down the line, as your business begins to mature, you end up basically kind of pivoting your product to basically hit more of the mass market, but that's kind of how you initially start off.
Can you share some of the key challenges you faced during the development of this product and how you overcame them?
Yeah, the key challenges, first of all, is that we were building a hardware product, right?
Hardware product is really hard though.
You've probably heard hardware is hard. That's because not only are we a software company, we have to be a really good software company because the hardware obviously has to interact with your phone. We have products that we build online, but we literally have to make a physical product on top of that. And so when you're going out to pitch for money, and if, in general, VCs or people that give money are focused on risk-adjusted returns, it's less risky to invest in a software product than it is for hardware, right? There's just more problems that are going to go wrong because there's more things you need to do. And so that was, kind of the first challenge is you obviously have more people you need to bring in. You have a different varying skill sets of people because we have hardware and we have software. And then raising money obviously is a kind of harder problem to navigate through as well.
What were some of the pivotal moments that shaped MySutro's trajectory? Were there any unexpected turns along the way?
Yeah, I think an unexpected moment, and this is kind of what's really interesting and true about business, is Nicholas Nassim Taleb has a book about this called The Black Swan. And the Black Swan basically says that these quote unquote black swan events basically end up changing what the next handful of years of what we would call stability end up looking like, right? So you have events like World War I or World War II. You have a really big event like the financial crisis or like COVID, right? And so where I'm getting to is actually COVID was a challenge, but it was also a really interesting positive movement in the company's growth as well. Because when COVID or coronavirus happened, especially in the US, they had basically locked everything up, right? They'd closed businesses. You have to stay inside. And when you were inside, you can imagine that families that had kids that were studying, on their computers with school, they had to keep them entertained somehow, right? Because the parents were also working on their computers, sitting on Zoom, sitting on Google Meet. And so part of that process actually ended up being a boon for our business. We ended up growing in sales because people were stuck at home. They could not go to a swimming pool and spa supply store to get any sort of advice or recommendations. And so they basically went online to see if a product existed that could measure water chemistry and tell them what to do. And so it was a challenge because we weren't expecting it. We had initially built our entire business model on going B2B and selling the Sutro through pool stores. And we had to pivot in the course of 1 month, build up an entire online retail store. But it ended up becoming actually a very positive movement in the kind of growth of Sutro.
Have there been any specific customer stories or experiences related to MySutro that stand out? Stories that highlight the real impact your product has had?
Yeah, I think the story that really sticks out is when we finally hit our first 1,000 users. That was just kind of a very big and I would say kind of magical moment. Like we'd been tracking, we had this tracker in the company that was tracking sales and deployments, right? And we were kind of like, when we reach 1,000 customers, we know that our systems have to be big enough. Our app has to be big enough. We have to have a logistics and distribution system that's strong enough. And so it kind of, it's a small number in the grand scale of things. But for a startup team that was building a prototype in their garage, moving to manufacturing and then shipping our first 1,000 devices really was kind of that pivotal moment, or a moment that really sticks out in my mind of when we finally hit that number.
So when was that?
That I think was in the summer of 2020. And MySutro I actually started the company in 2014. And then we got acquired by a large water sanitation company in Canada. in, I think, 2018, 2019 timeframe, 2018. And we shipped our first units on March of 2020. So right when COVID was happening.
As an entrepreneur, how do you maintain that zero BS mindset and cut through the noise to focus on what truly matters?
So I always have a philosophy that you need to listen to your customer, right? You build the product, which is a solution to a problem. And first principles thinking gets you back to, well, what is that problem, right? And then are you building the right solution for that problem? And so to get to kind of a zero BS mindset, I always go back to the truth of who are we building this for? And do they have any feedback? Do they have any concerns? And so there can be a bunch of feedback all around me. But if the customer is not asking something, then we're spending time on not doing something that's solving the right problem. And so that's kind of the way that I cut through the noise.
For founders struggling with that initial fundraising slog, what are some of the creative ways you went about building a strong pipeline of potential investors? What tips can you share for effectively getting in front of the right people and securing that critical first round of funding?
A lot of what I've realized in business is a lot of what you do is based off of people, right? If you're just genuine, if you're honest, if you bring the right people around you, naturally doors will start to open, right? And so just kind of a tactical way that I built a strong pipeline is by, one, attending events. I think probably 5 to 6 days a week, I would be at some sort of a happy hour, taking a coffee, taking, a beer, whatever that might be, meeting people that either are founders or entrepreneurs or VCs or even customers, to make sure that I was sucking in as much information as I could, to make sure that when I did go out and pitch, I kind of knew what I was saying. Secondly is the kind of more meetings you have and the more people you meet, the more you open yourselves up to what I would call serendipity, right? Serendipity is kind of a big word because people think that it's like, oh, it's gonna happen when it happens. But there is a way to engineer serendipity. And the way to engineer serendipity is by always showing up and probabilistically putting yourself in more places at more times, because then you'll be at the right place at the right time, right? If you're in all places at all times, you will be in the right place at the right time. And so you just kind of have to always be open, to keep your ears open, your eyes open, to make sure that you're just honestly being a good person, meeting up with people, help wherever you can. And then when it comes time to kind of ask for something that you need, the people around you will be more apt to help you.
When it comes to building your founding team, what qualities or characteristics did you look for in key hires like co-founders, employees, and advisors? How can aspiring entrepreneurs identify and recruit that core group of people who will be instrumental to their success?
This is kind of one of the lessons that I learned against what I just said before about surrounding yourselves with the right people and kind of cutting through kind of the no BS. In the very early days of Sutro, I actually ended up listening a lot to the people around me, right? I sometimes listened less to myself and listened more to the other people. And that kind of led me to bringing in, I would say, the wrong people in the organization that necessarily weren't the most positive, both in terms of their work ethic as well as kind of the way that the business should have been structured. And so are they bad people? No, right? Were they not the right people for the business that we were building? Probably. And so when I kind of think back on what makes a good person for Sutro or a good person for the team that I want to surround, the first rule that I always go by is I have to make sure that I'm basically hiring up, is this term that I have, right? Hiring up means that everybody you surround yourself with should be smarter in their area of expertise. And if you know more than them, then you're kind of hiring down, right? You never want to be the smartest person in the room. You almost want to be the dumbest person in the room, given all of your employees you have, because they're the ones that are actually working on making the company better. And so if you're continuously hiring up, you're like pulling this tent up into the air, right? But if you're hiring
and you're
down,
pulling yourself,
and you're pulling yourself up, exactly. And there was many times in the beginning that I didn't do that. I sometimes knew more than the people that I was hiring, and not a testament to how smart I am. I'm saying I just wasn't hiring properly. I wasn't surrounding myself with the right people that I should have been. And so that's kind of one thing that I say: make sure that entrepreneurs hire up. Like, find people that are smarter than you that you can surround yourself with. The second thing is, I feel like as a founder, you almost need to do every single job yourself until you can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
because
Do
when
it.
you do that job enough, it's in the short term a really bad use of your time because you probably should hire it out. But in the long term, it's better because when you hire somebody, when you hire up, you actually know what to tell them and how you actually want that to be constructed because you know the gaps that you weren't able to fill and who you should hire in to actually fill those gaps. And you generally will understand the process, right? And so that's kind of the second thing that I would advise to founders or entrepreneurs that are first starting off.
As your company scaled, how did you navigate the transition from founder to more operational CEO? What were some of the biggest challenges, and how did you maintain the innovative entrepreneurial spirit as Sutro grew?
Yeah, that's always challenging, right? I think the acquisition story is challenging for a lot of people because the very physics of the acquisition is that you are being acquired by another entity. You're being acquired by another culture, by different people, by a culture that's probably long-standing and much more older than probably you and your company are,
Yeah.
right? And so I wouldn't necessarily say there's, many times entrepreneurs think it's this battle they're going into. I think it's much more of what I would call like a coalescence. It's like you need to figure out where there are holes in the organization, why they acquired you, what that North Star is. And I feel like the way to continuously keep innovating is by first sitting down with the acquiring team and figuring out what is our combined North Star, right? Where are we both going together? And that many times may be different than your initial vision that you had when you first started the startup. And the second thing to do to kind of innovate, to continuously innovate, is when you have that North Star that you have built with the acquiring company, is you make sure that you communicate that back to your team, right? Many times founders and entrepreneurs kind of, when they get acquired, they go into a hole again and they lose all of that communication and all of that kind of closeness that they had with their team. And there's no reason to kind of throw that out the window just because you've been acquired. And so that's kind of like the two ways that I make sure that we're continuously innovating, that we're aligned, and that my team is aligned.
For entrepreneurs weighing the decision to pursue an acquisition versus continuing to grow independently, what are the key factors they should consider? What advice would you give founders on evaluating that path forward?
Honestly, I would say to trust your gut, right? There's been many times that I've talked to founders that have been greedy in the short term, right? They're like, oh, I can get a better acquisition offer later. And sometimes the thing that's falling on your lap, not 100% of the time, but when it's there, you sometimes just want to strike the opportunity, right? And so I think each story is different. And so if a founder is going through an acquisition, if they really feel that they can push this forward, they really have strong ideals on why they actually want to take this forward, then go that route, right? Honestly, then keep going that way because the acquisition might be bad for you. Where we were in our journey, like I said at the beginning of the podcast, hardware is hard, right? It requires money, requires financial backing, it requires distribution. And it probably was the best decision for us at the time. And so we ended up signing it, right? That's kind of what it was. And also our acquirers are great. They just are very genuine people. I love the CEO, the entire management team. And so I think, it was just a good fit and it was a good time for what we were doing when we were doing it. But I think the story is different for every entrepreneur and they really need to kind of sit down and analyze that. And there really is no single rubric for them to figure it out. They're just going to have to make the decision themselves with parameters that they come up with themselves.
You've emphasized the need for scalable solutions in water testing. Can you share an example of where MySutro's technology has made a significant difference in a community or individual's life, reflecting this scalability?
Yeah, I think from helping out people, that kind of goes back to those first 1,000 users that I'd mentioned, right? When we see positive feedback on reviews or when people write in and they're like, hey, this really helps my family, it keeps my kids safe. It's just so nice to see that. Like just this morning, I got a text message from one of our customers and he was like, hey, I sold this product last year. We've sold a bunch of them. And I think there was an issue with our code not working, right? So there was like a problem in the flow that he was trying to sell the product. And that caused him to like send me a text message where he was like, I love this product so much and your code not working on your e-commerce store is like causing me an issue, right? And so that's like, it's so great to hear that when somebody's like all of this positive stuff and he's like, hey, can you fix this problem for me? Obviously there was a problem, right? We don't know why the e-commerce thing wasn't working, but it's just so cool to see that cause quote unquote pain to somebody, right? That's when you know that you've built something that really makes a difference and people are using it.
Looking at the broader water technology landscape, where do you see the biggest opportunities for aspiring entrepreneurs to drive meaningful impact? What advice would you give founders looking to tackle some of the most pressing water-related problems across different industries and geographies?
Our goal is always to go into different types of water, right? We want to be where water is treated and where it impacts the largest pieces of humanity, right? And a lot of that is in agriculture, it's in drinking water, it's in our built environment. Swimming pools, I look at it as, even though it's a very large market, I think about it as our test market. It's our beachhead. It's how we get into the market to understand how to manufacture, how the product works. But the long-term goal, and I wish this with our acquirer as well, because they have water sanitation products in all of these other different industries. And so if we can get it right in the swimming pool industry, we can scale horizontally to a bunch of these other industries to actually solve water where it really matters.
In your talk, you mentioned the importance of understanding the problem before finding a solution. Can you discuss a time when this philosophy was particularly challenging, and how did you navigate that?
I would say it's particularly challenging, for example, when you have, like a VC or an investor that's telling you to do a particular thing that may or may not understand your market, right? We had this a lot, kind of back to the how do you cut through the BS question that you had asked me. When you're founding a startup, like we were talking about earlier, you get a bunch of advice, right, from a lot of people. And I've had this with actually a lot of founders. We try to figure out how do you cut through that BS. That's where it gets really tricky, right? Figuring out the problem before the solution, where you have an investor that doesn't really understand much about your business, that's telling you to do something. And you almost are in the middle of like, well, this person has given me money. Do I do what he or she is saying because they're saying it? Or do I do what's right for the customer because I know and I listen and I see what the customers need all the time? And so that's kind of where it's been challenging, right? You kind of have to make a decision to figure out what is the best way and what's the next objective. And again, maybe your objective is raising more money. And in that case, for the short term, you might do that thing, right? To raise more money, to kind of satiate him or her. And for all you know, maybe it is a good idea. But most often than not, I try to listen to as much customer data as possible to make sure that I'm really hearing the information from the market and then make decisions accordingly on what to build because I then see that problem in the field.
Your personal journey from a venture capital fund in India to tackling global water issues is quite inspiring. What has been the most rewarding part of this transition for you?
I would say what really has been the most rewarding part is probably waking up every day and just being excited to go to work, right? There's a lot of people that I know that are not excited of going to work. Right? They sit at a job or they do something where they're just not happy. And there's good days and there's bad days, right? I'm not saying that I'm like always happy every single day that I show up to work, but I think that the really cool thing in doing the global water challenges as well as kind of working on Sutro is that I just kind of get this intense pleasure in showing up from work and knowing that I'm doing something that one is solving like a distinct and core problem. And secondarily, I'm working with a team that really values working on the exact same problem as well. And so I think from like an approach as an entrepreneur standpoint, if you show up with a smile on your face every single day, that permeates through your team, right? Like they will notice that you are happy, that you're joyful, that you're like working, gracefully through the things that you're trying to do. And I think that like graciousness is the most rewarding part, right? So I would like honestly say every single day is what allows me to wake up and like keep doing this every single day.
You're right. When you show up work with a high level of energy that will be transmitted to your team, means as a founder, you always show how you want your team to be by acting like you want to be there with them to solve the problem you meant to solve and fulfill the vision you have. You've seen firsthand the challenges of water quality in various parts of the world. What are some common misconceptions people have about water issues, and how does MySutro address them?
Yeah, water quality is very interesting, right? It's funny, people know that I'm the founder of Sutro, and they'll ask me this question of like, hey, what is my tap water safe to drink? Or what kind of a filter should I get to clean my water? Or is it okay to boil my water? Right? And so these problems are kind of always very interesting questions to hear. And some common misconceptions, first of all, is especially in the US, right? The majority of water is actually safe to drink. I know in other parts of the world, obviously, you maybe shouldn't drink the water out of the tap water. But the next question is actually the most important one to answer, right? Is how do I know if my water is safe? And that usually comes with a testing device, right? That's kind of goes back to that full circle of me seeing the deal flow in India and then obviously creating the sensor. And so our technology basically aims to answer that first question of is my water safe or is it not, based off of a suite of parameters that you would or would not need to test. And then based off of that information, based off of whether is my water safe or not, we can then actually help you in getting your water safe for the application that you need it at. And so that's kind of one of the common misconceptions that people kind of want to go straight to the fix, but the fix is actually different based off of what the problem is. And so solving that problem first, realizing a diagnostics of what's actually wrong with my water will give you a cleaner answer onto how to fix my water if I know that something's wrong with it.
Looking towards the future, what emerging technologies or trends do you believe will have the most significant impact on water quality and accessibility?
Energy is what I would say actually will have the biggest movement on water quality and accessibility. And why I say energy is because our current energy sources is they're not clean. They're a finite source of energy, right? So like we're depleting reserves as the population grows. And even the sustainable sources are kind of mechanical in its own nature. I'm not debating whether or not we should or shouldn't deploy any of these energy technologies, but I feel like if there is a cleaner, more abundant source of energy, we can actually unlock cleaner water. We can unlock technologies like desalination. We can unlock more water filtration technologies. And so I think actually if you go one level underneath, energy and energy like generation and energy storage is going to be the unlocking factor of actually how you really bring more accessibility and quality water to people.
Looking forward to the future right now with the trending of AI, is MySutro using AI on enhancing their product? And what part is AI playing on the product side?
We are, yeah. We do use AI in our computational methods to actually figure out what the water chemistry is. We use it from a computational side. So like the numerical approaches that we use in calculating water chemistry, we use AI for those models.
Let's do a quick rapid fire round. When you need inspiration as an entrepreneur, what podcast do you listen to?
I listen to Radio Lab by WNYC when I need inspiration.
What role do you see AI technologies in the water industry moving forward?
AI is definitely interesting, right? I think AI is like a terminology or a technology, kind of like the internet, right? You need to build layers on top like TCP/IP. There needs to be browsers. There needs to be Chrome. There needs to be Microsoft Edge. When you get internet, you'll need to build the iPhone so that it can then, work with the internet and bring data down. Mark Zuckerberg will need to create the Facebook app on iPhone so we can use a social network on the iPhone. So like it is an underlying technology, but it's also not the end all be all. And there'll need to be a lot of applications that are built on top that are a lot more custom, a lot more useful for each particular application that you need. Right. And so where does AI play in the water piece? I mean, I think like LLMs are interesting. If you look at the LLM side of things, there might be a way to figure out how water regulation is changing around the world. I think AI or machine learning from a computational analysis standpoint, right? There's a lot of data and a lot of numbers in the water market to figure out if water quality is good, is there distributed water data across, land, or is water available in particular ground sources? Like I think AI and machine learning can be great for like modeling and simulation in terms of access to water, but just AI generally, I think like if you look at, ChatGPT, like I said, it's like one application on top of a technology that's probably going to be the lake that we're floating on, right? There's not necessarily like a particular thing right now that you can just do with AI.
What's one thing you do every morning before jumping into work?
One thing I do every single morning is I actually meditate for 30 minutes.
Finally, name one up and coming entrepreneur you think our listeners should keep an eye on.
The upcoming entrepreneurs. I feel like Brett Adcock from Figure is a great voice in the market right now. Is it Figure AI or Figure? Yeah, I think it's Figure AI.
Yeah.
I really like, I forget the founder's name, but the company's called Helion. They're doing nuclear fusion up in Seattle. Is another interesting technology to look into. And yeah, those are two that come top to mind right now.
Huge thank you, Ravi, for telling us the MySutro startup story.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
Sincere thanks to Ravi Kurani for sharing the inspiring story behind the creation and growth of MySutro. Listeners, I encourage you to visit mysutro.com to explore their innovative water quality monitoring solutions and learn more about the company's mission. To all our Entrepreneurship Unboxed audience members, continue pursuing that unrelenting entrepreneurial drive, remain resilient in the face of challenges, and never lose sight of your bigger vision. We'll be back next week with another insightful conversation sure to provide valuable takeaways. Until then, keep shipping your products, stay hungry to learn, and persistently grow your business. This is your host AJ signing off. I wish you all a productive and fulfilling rest of your day. Keep dreaming big and building impactful ventures.